The first time Imogen Vale saw it, she thought it was a joke, an art student's prank, a guerrilla bit of theater meant to go viral before lunchtime. A blue circle of enamel sat on the brickwork of a narrow townhouse off a quiet Bloomsbury street, framed by two soot-darkened pilasters and a door painted the sort of black that tries to look older than it is. The plaque gleamed too greenly for London. It caught the thin winter light like a coin on a pavement. And beneath it, already, a crowd. Phones raised. A couple with matching scarves leaned in for a selfie. A tour guide's voice floated above the murmurs, excited and performative. Newly revealed, everyone, until today unknown to the public. Imogen slowed, her tote bag dragging against her knee. She had been on her way to a client in Fitzrovia, a quick stop to evaluate a set of 19th century ledgers with damp damage. She wasn't dressed for crowds or cameras. Sensible coat, sensible boots, hair pinned back without ceremony. But her eyes wouldn't leave the plaque. The color was right, the famous London blue, but the finish was wrong. It looked like it had been fired yesterday. The lettering had that stiff, modern sharpness that design software loves. And worst of all, it had a little addition beneath the text, a neat black and white QR code, like a bruise on a face. Someone had made a plaque that wanted to be scanned. A young woman with bright lipstick noticed Imogen staring and beamed as if they were friends. "Did you hear?" she whispered. "It's Oscar Wilde. He wrote here. Like actually wrote here." Imogen grinked. "Wilde didn't—" "I know," the woman said, thrilled by the correction she wasn't hearing. "It's insane, and there's apparently, something inside." The townhouse door stood open, attended by a man in a beige coat who looked as if he'd been hired to look harmless. He held the crowd with gentle hands. "One at a time," he kept saying. "Just up the stairs. Quick look, then out the back." A look at what? Imogen's phone buzzed, a message from her friend Theo, sent 2 minutes ago. "Are you near Bloomsbury? That plaque is fake. Do not touch it. Call me." Imogen looked up at the plaque again, and a slow chill moved under her ribs. If Theo was warning her, it wasn't about taste. Theo Park was the sort of man who lived for obscure facts and hated drama. If he'd used capital letters, something was wrong. She typed back with cold thumbs. "I'm here. What is this?" The crowd pressed forward, and without meaning to, Imogen pressed with it. The beige-coated man smiled at her like a bouncer at a quiet club. "Just a quick upstairs," he said. "You'll want to see it. It's extraordinary." Imogen's instincts flared, the same instincts she trusted when she handled fragile paper and found mold where no one else did smell it. "Who put this plaque up?" she asked. The man's smile remained, but it thinned. "It's been arranged." "By whom?" He glanced past her shoulder at the line, at the phones, at the hungry faces.
"The house is part of a literary—" A sharp sound cut him off. Not a scream, a gasp, swallowed quickly as if someone had tried to keep it polite. Then a woman's voice, shaking with excitement and fear. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" The beige-coated man's hand shot out as if to steady the air. "Please," he said, "please everyone remain calm." Imogen's feet moved before her mind decided. She slipped past him and into the townhouse. Inside, the air was warm and old. Not truly old, London old, where paint layers hide years like sediment. A hallway light flickered faintly above a worn tiled floor. The walls were hung with framed prints, quills, ink bottles, silhouettes of men who looked stern and important. A narrow staircase rose ahead, the carpet runners slightly frayed, the banister polished by countless hands. Upstairs, murmurs clustered like birds. Imogen climbed, forcing her breathing steady. At the landing, an open door revealed a front room lit by a tall window. The crowd had formed a semicircle, respectfully distant from the center. In the middle of the room, a man lay on the floor. Not collapsed, not fallen, arranged. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt, the cuffs deliberately unfastened. His hands were positioned palm up, fingers slightly curled, as if he'd just dropped something. A knife lay across his chest with a careful symmetry, it's angled for the camera. Beside him, propped against an easel, stood a portrait.
It was a painting of a young man, beautiful, arrogant, mouth relaxed in a half smile. The paint was glossy and fresh, still wet enough to catch the light. And the man on the floor, in contrast, looked old. Not simply dead, aged. His face was grayed and creased, his hair thin and dull, the skin around his mouth drawn tight, as if time had been yanked forward in one brutal, unnatural jump. Imogen's stomach turned. A woman near the doorway whispered, almost reverent, "It's Dorian Gray." Imogen stared at the tableau, the knife, the portrait, the aged corpse. Someone had staged a murder to look like literature, and outside on the brick, a plaque was calling more people in.
By the time the police arrived, the townhouse had become a mouth, spitting witnesses onto the pavement and swallowing them back into questions. The crowd had doubled. The plaque shone above it all like a badge of authority, flashing an ID and a patience that had limits. Imogen stood near the railings opposite the door, hands numb around her tote bag handles. She'd given her name twice already to two different uniforms who looked like they were trying to be calm in the presence of a story that didn't belong on a normal shift. The beige-coated man had vanished, so had the tour guide voice. Only the plaque remained, calm and circular and wrong. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stepped out of an unmarked car and paused long enough to take in the scene. The phones, the murmurs, the press already sniffing at the edges. He looked like someone who had spent a career walking into other people's catastrophes. He approached the door, glanced up at the plaque, and his expression changed, subtle but sharp. "Whose idea was this?" he asked the nearest officer. The officer shrugged helplessly. "It was there when we arrived, sir." The man muttered something under his breath and walked straight to Imogen. "You were inside," he said. It wasn't a question. Imogen nodded. "Detective Chief Inspector Hargreaves," he said, flashing a warrant card. "Tell me what you saw."
She described the room, the body, the portrait, the knife. She watched his face as she spoke and saw the exact moment the phrase "aged corpse" stopped being curiosity and became irritation. "This isn't theater," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "It was staged," Imogen replied. "Every detail, the positioning, the painting, the reference, it's a deliberate imitation." He looked at her, finally registering that she wasn't simply a shocked passerby. "And you'd know that because?" "I'm a conservator," she said. "Books, paper, occasionally historical signage. And because whoever made that plaque didn't know what they were doing." Hargreaves' eyes flicked upward again. "You think the plaque is fake?" "It has a QR code," she said, as if that alone should be enough. "The enamel finish is too new. The typeface is wrong.
The mounting bolts are modern. Someone wants attention. Hargreaves' mouth tightened, and they've got it. An officer approached with a gloved hand raised. "Sir, press are on their way. Social's already." Hargreaves cut him off with a look. Then he turned back to Imogen. "Would you be willing to repeat what you just said to my team inside?" Imogen hesitated. She didn't like stepping into police work. It made her skin itch, like touching a book with damp hands. But she looked at the plaque again and felt anger prick her fear.
Someone had weaponized London's history, its love of stories, its obsession with famous names, to lure people into a crime scene like it was an exhibition. And she couldn't shake the image of the man on the floor, aged into a grotesque punctuation mark. "I'll come," she said. Hargreaves nodded once, already moving. "Then do it quickly, before this becomes a carnival." As they stepped toward the door, Imogen's phone buzzed again. Theo calling. She answered with a trembling thumb. "The plaque is a trap," Theo said immediately, voice tight. "Imogen, listen to me. That design is circulating. It's been offered to tour companies. It's not just one plaque." "Who would do that?" Theo exhaled. "Someone who wants crowds exactly where they choose." Imogen stared at the townhouse door as they crossed the threshold. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and something chemical sweet that didn't belong in a living home. "Then they wanted this crowd," Imogen whispered. Theo's voice dropped. "And they wanted someone inside to be seen." The front room upstairs had changed. Where there had been a semicircle of gawkers, there was now tape and gloves and careful, efficient movement. The corpse remained in place, but the room had lost its theatrical hush. Under police lights and clipped voices, the tableau looked less like art and more like what it truly was, a human being used as a prop. Imogen stood near the doorway while a forensic photographer took measured shots of the knife, the portrait, the man's hands. A young constable hovered with a notebook, trying not to look sick. Hargreaves introduced Imogen to a woman in a navy suit with a sharp face and sharper eyes. "D.S. Priya Shah," he said. "She'll take your statement." Shah listened without interruption as Imogen repeated what she'd seen. When Imogen finished, Shah's gaze shifted to the portrait. "Fresh paint," Imogen added. "You can see it. Still glossy." Shah nodded. "Our forensic team confirmed the knife didn't make the main wound. It was placed. The actual injury is elsewhere." Imogen swallowed, not asking where. Hargreaves stepped to the window and looked out at the street below. The crowd remained, restless, hungry. Someone had already brought coffee, as if they intended to stay for the whole show. "Tell me about the plaque," he said, still looking outward. Imogen led them back downstairs to the hallway, then out to the pavement, where the blue circle sat above the door. Shah stood beneath it and tilted her head. "It looks convincing," Shah said.
"That's why it works," Imogen replied. "People want it to be real. London loves being told it's walking past history every day." Hargreaves' gaze fixed on the QR code. "And that?" "Modern bait," Imogen said. "Scan it, it takes you somewhere, probably a page that confirms what you already want to believe." Shah raised her phone, but Hargreaves stopped her with a hand. "Not on your personal," he said. "We'll have digital take it." Imogen leaned closer, studying the edge where enamel met brick. "It's been installed recently. See the dust residue around the bolts? That's drill dust, fresh, and the grout line doesn't match the weathering." Hargreaves' expression hardened. So whoever did this had access to the facade, power tools, and the confidence that nobody would question them. "High-vis jacket," Shah murmured, "clipboard, ladder." "And a story," Imogen said. She looked up at the plaque's text and felt her anger sharpen into something clearer. It didn't simply claim a famous name, it claimed a moment. It read as if it had always been there,
as if London itself was confirming a myth. Hargreaves spoke quietly, and inside they staged a death out of a famous novel. Not just any death, Imogen said, a death about image and corruption and hidden truth. Someone wanted the symbolism. Shah's eyes narrowed, or wanted the attention. Hargreaves looked at the crowd again, or wanted the cover. Imogen's phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from Theo. That plaque design isn't random.
It's a copy of the English Heritage Style Guide, but with one tiny error. Imogen typed back fast. What error? Theo responded almost instantly. The shade. It's slightly too blue. They used Prussian blue pigment in the enamel, not cobalt mix. That pigment isn't common in legit supply chains. Imogen's stomach tightened. Prussian blue. She'd seen that pigment before, not on plaques, but on theater props. Cheap, vivid, dramatic. And in restoration work, it lingered on gloves and cloth like a stubborn stain. She looked at the plaque again, suddenly seeing it not as a symbol, but as evidence. A color signature, a fingerprint in paint. And somewhere inside the townhouse, a portrait glistened, freshly painted, wet with the same kind of intention.
Back upstairs, D.S. Shaw guided Imogen to the edge of the room again, keeping her behind tape. A forensic technician in a white suit leaned over the portrait, taking tiny swabs from the paint surface. Imogen watched, heart thudding. "Be careful," she said instinctively. "If it's still wet." The technician glanced up, amused behind his mask. "We've got it." Shaw crouched near the quartz's hands. "You said he looked aged." "It's more than pallor," Imogen replied. "Look at the lines, the thinning hair. Someone did something to him. Makeup, prosthetics, chemicals, something." Shaw's gaze sharpened. "Staged decomposition?" "No," Imogen said, shivering. "Not decay. Age." The technician called quietly. "DS, the portrait paint is modern acrylic, not oil, quick-dry medium, and it's been applied within the last 6 hours." Shaw stood. "So they painted it today." Hargreaves entered the room and stopped dead at the sight again, as if the arrangement still offended him on a personal level. He stared at the corpse, then the portrait, then the knife. "Identity?" he asked. Shaw's voice lowered. "Male, mid-50s. No ID on body, but we have a phone in his pocket, locked, and a ring with initials." Imogen's eyes caught on something near the victim's hand, a small, dark smear on the floorboard, as if someone had dragged a brush or cloth. She leaned forward slightly, squinting. "That," she said. Shaw followed her gaze. "What?" "Near his fingers," Imogen said. "That's pigment. Blue."
The technician looked up sharply. "Where?" Imogen pointed carefully, and the technician shifted to examine it under a portable light. The smear wasn't bright. It was subtle, like a ghost of color. But under the lamp, it deepened into a distinct, cool tone. "Prussian," the technician murmured. "Maybe." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "From the plaque?" "Or from whoever put it up," Imogen said. "If they handled it without proper gloves. Or if they carried pigment into the room." Hargreaves' gaze lifted to the portrait again. "And the portrait? Any blue?" The technician swabbed and nodded. "We'll test." Imogen felt the room close in. The murder wasn't just staged with props. It was staged with materials that had a supply chain, a source, a person behind them. Someone had made a plan that began outside on the street and ended here, on this floor, with a body turned into a reference. Hargreaves moved toward the window and looked down again, and Imogen followed his gaze. The crowd had grown. Someone had printed out the plaque text and was reading it aloud like scripture. A person in a flat cap had started giving a history talk, making up details with confidence. The lie was already alive. Why would they want people to see it? Imogen asked. Hargreaves' voice was cold. So they don't look for what they're missing. Shaw's phone buzzed. She checked it and frowned. Sir, Digital just accessed the QR code using a sandbox device. And? Hargreaves asked. Shaw swallowed. It leads to a site titled London's Lost Blue Plaques, Secret Literary Addresses. There's a countdown timer for tonight, and a map. Imogen's throat went tight. A map to what? She whispered. Shah's eyes met hers. To another address. Hargreaves' jaw clenched. So this isn't a one-off. Imogen stared at the corpse, then the portrait, then the knife placed like a signature. Someone was turning London into a serial story, and the next chapter already had an address.
They evacuated the townhouse within the hour, pushing people back with firm politeness that turned sharp when someone tried to slip under tape for a better photo. A small cluster of journalists arrived, faces bright with the thrill of tragedy they didn't have to own. Imogen stood with Hargreaves and Shaw near the unmarked car, while officers photographed the plaque and placed a temporary covering over it. The crowd booed as if history had been stolen from them. Shaw held up her phone so Hargreaves could see the map on the fake plaque website, a stylized London street grid with a blinking pin over a location in Chelsea. Tonight, Shaw said. Countdown ends at 9. Imogen's mind flashed to the corpse's arranged hands, the portrait still wet, the blue smear by the fingers. They're going to do it again, she said. Hargreaves didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the crowd, on the way they shifted and leaned, eager to be part of a story. Then he said, if they do, we'll be there. Shaw hesitated. Sir, we can't ignore a timed map posted by whoever staged this, Hargreaves said, and we can't let them choose the next stage. Imogen's phone vibrated. Theo again. Chelsea Pin is near Tedworth Square. That's a private terrace, rich area, lots of tour groups. Imogen showed the message to Shaw, who nodded grimly. They'll have crowds again, Shaw said. Different kind. Tourists, influencers, literary walking tours. Hargreaves looked at Imogen. Why would a killer want a crowd? Imogen exhaled. Because crowds create noise. They block lines of sight. They turn people into witnesses who can't remember details because they're watching their own phones. Shaw added, crowds also create cover for someone to move in and out. Hargreaves' gaze sharpened. Or to move something. Imogen remembered the body upstairs, how carefully placed it was, how deliberate the death looked. They want it discovered, she said. They want the reveal. Hargreaves' voice dropped. Then we'll deny them the reveal. He turned to Shaw. Get uniforms at that Chelsea address early, quietly, no spectacle. Digital liaise with English Heritage. If anyone hears Blue Plaque and Chelsea, they'll turn up in droves. Shaw nodded, already moving. Hargreaves looked back at Imogen, and for the first time there was something almost apologetic in his expression. You're involved now, he said. Imogen's throat tightened. I didn't ask to be. No, he replied. But whoever did, they designed the trap for people like you. People who notice details. People who know the difference between real history and a good imitation. Imogen stared at the covered plaque on the wall, the lie now shrouded like a body. Then they made a mistake, she said quietly, because I do notice. By the time Imogen reached Tedworth Square, the street already hummed. Chelsea's crowds were different, less chaotic, more curated. People in tailored coats, people with expensive cameras, people who spoke with the soft confidence of those who assume the city exists for their enjoyment. And there, on the clean brick facade of a cream townhouse, was another blue circle. Same style, same wrong shade, same QR code. This time, it drew attention like a magnet. A woman with a tour flag had gathered a group under it and was speaking quickly, trying to get ahead of the narrative. "Now, please understand," she was saying, "this plaque is not officially recognized." But her group barely listened. Their phones were already aimed. Imogen spotted Shaw across the street, half hidden near a lamppost, wearing a different coat and a different face. Hargreaves stood a little behind her, hands in pockets, gaze scanning the crowd. Imogen kept her distance and watched. At 8:59, the countdown on the fake site hit its final minute. The crowd, guided by the invisible hand of the internet, grew quieter. Even people who hadn't scanned the code sensed something was about to happen. 9 o'clock. Nothing obvious changed. No door opened, no scream, no dramatic reveal. For a second, Imogen felt hope, the irrational hope that the police presence had interrupted whatever was planned. Then a window on the second floor flicked on. A bright white light illuminated the glass, revealing a silhouette inside.
A man stood there, perfectly still. And then, slowly, the curtains parted from within, as if pulled by unseen hands. The crowd gasped as one, a collective intake of breath that felt rehearsed. Behind the window, on display like a museum piece, was a scene. A figure in old-fashioned clothing slumped in a chair beside a writing desk, head tilted at a careful angle, a book open in front of him. A pool of something dark spread across the desk surface, not gore, not explicit, but enough to suggest death. On the wall behind him hung a framed quote in elegant lettering. Imogen's stomach turned. They weren't just doing murder. They were doing exhibitions. Shaw's radio crackled, barely audible. Officers moved, pushing toward the townhouse door, but the crowd pressed too, hungry for the spectacle. Imogen saw Hargreaves' jaw tighten as he watched the crowd act like a tide. And then the front door opened, not from inside, from the outside. A man in a high-vis vest stepped forward with a key like he belonged there. He held the door open and gestured grandly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, voice bright, "please, single file." Hargreaves moved fast, pushing through. "Police," he snapped, flashing his ID. "Step away from the door." The high-vis man smiled as if this was part of the performance. "Of course," he said, stepping aside too easily. Shaw grabbed his arm. "Who are you?" "Just the caretaker," he said lightly. "Hired help." Hargreaves stormed inside with 2 uniforms. Shaw hauled the high-vis man aside, but his smile didn't break. Imogen stood frozen as the upstairs window scene remained lit, still and staged, drawing every phone. Then, from inside the townhouse, a shout, not scripted, real. "Sir!" a constable's voice. "We've got—" The crowd surged, and Imogen knew, with a cold certainty, that the killer hadn't been stopped. The killer had simply moved the story forward. The body in Chelsea wasn't a body. It was a dummy. A mannequin dressed as a dead writer, arranged to look like a famous literary death without actually killing anyone. The dark spill on the desk was paint, thick, glossy, theatrical. The real crime was downstairs. In the back room, behind a door disguised as a cupboard, officers found a man bound to a chair, alive but barely conscious, a gag pressed into his mouth,
eyes wide with terror. And on the floor beside him, a suitcase of tools, enamel paint, mounting brackets, drill bits, adhesive, gloves stained faintly blue, Prussian blue. Hargreaves emerged pale and furious, pushing through the hallway as if the house itself offended him. Shaw met him at the door. "He's alive," she said quickly. "Hostage. Looks like he was meant to be the real reveal later." Hargreaves exhaled sharply, anger shifting into a tighter focus. "And our high-vis caretaker?" Shaw's jaw clenched. "Gone." Imogen felt the night air thicken around her. "He vanished?" "He slipped into the crowd," she said. "He used the crowd like a doorway." Hargreaves looked at the phones, the faces, the people who thought they were witnessing culture. "That's the point. They're not just baiting. They're escaping through us." Imogen's phone buzzed. A new message from Theo. The first victim, the Bloomsbury man, might be Dr. Lionel Carfax, literary scholar. He was working on a book called London's Plaque Wars. He was digging into fake history rackets.
Imogen showed it to Shaw, who grimaced. "We suspected the same. Fingerprints pending, but the description fits." Hargreaves' gaze sharpened. A scholar investigating fake plaques gets murdered in a fake plaque trap. Imogen's mind clicked. So the killer is curating London, deciding which stories are real. Shaw's voice lowered, or punishing people who expose the scam. Hargreaves stared at the townhouse facade, at the blue circle still shining above the door. "Who benefits?" he asked, more to himself than to them. Imogen answered quietly. "Tour companies, influencer accounts, secret London brands, people who monetize hidden history." Shaw nodded. "And people who sell replicas, plaques, tours, experiences." Hargreaves' eyes narrowed. "Then we look at who promoted it." He turned to Shaw. "Find the earliest social posts, the first account to share the QR link, the first tour company to mention newly revealed plaque. Someone seeded this." Shaw nodded, already moving. Imogen stared at the upstairs window where the staged death still glowed. The mannequin sat frozen in its chair, eternally mid-novel, eternally dead in a way designed for consumption. It was a mockery of art. And Imogen realized something colder. The killer wasn't hiding behind literature. The killer was writing with it.
At 11:17 p.m., the fake plaque website updated. Not with a new plaque, with a new pin. This time, Spitalfields. Imogen sat in the back of an unmarked car with Shaw, watching the screen glow between them. Hargreaves drove, jaw set, wiper slicing the rain. Spitalfields wasn't Chelsea's curated calm or Bloomsbury's academic hush. It was layered London. Markets, bars, tourists, locals, old silk weaver streets, and new money restaurants. A perfect place for crowds, noise, confusion. "A different audience," Shaw murmured. "More cameras." "More exits," Hargreaves replied. Imogen stared at the pin location. "And more stories." They arrived to find, of course, a crowd already forming. The internet moved faster than police cars. People with umbrellas clustered around a townhouse near a narrow lane, the brickwork damp and gleaming under streetlights. Another blue circle sat on the wall. Same wrong shade. But this time, the plaque text wasn't wild. It was Dickens. And the death staged inside, according to whispers rippling through the crowd, would be something from a famous novel. Something grim. Something London liked to remember about itself. Imogen felt nausea rise. They're escalating. Hargreaves pushed through the crowd, uniforms following,
while Shaw stayed just behind, eye scanning faces, searching for the high-vis caretaker, the smile, the calm. Imogen hung back, her gaze locked on the plaque. The QR code was slightly smudged, as if someone had handled it without care.
She leaned closer and saw, beneath the enamel edge, a tiny scratch, fresh, revealing a different color under the blue. Not brick, metal. The plaque wasn't just mounted, it was a cover. Imogen's breath caught. She reached into her tote bag, fingers brushing the small magnifier she carried for paperwork. She held it up, peering at the edge. Behind the plaque, she could see a seam in the brickwork that didn't belong. A hidden panel, a concealed opening. "Shaw," Imogen whispered urgently, turning her head. But Shaw was already moving, toward a figure in the crowd wearing a beige coat. The same beige coat. The man met Shaw's gaze and smiled. Then he melted backward into the crowd like smoke. Imogen's pulse spiked. She shoved closer to the wall, ignoring protests, and pressed her fingertips to the plaque edge. It was warm, not from the air, from something behind it. A hum vibrated faintly through the enamel, almost imperceptible, like a small motor. A device, a mechanism. Hargreaves' voice barked from the doorway, "Clear the area!" The crowd resisted, phones still up, but uniforms pushed harder now. Imogen's mind raced. The plaque wasn't just bait, it was a trigger, and whatever was behind it, whatever the warmth and hum meant, was about to turn the story into something worse.
They got the crowd back far enough to breathe. Hargreaves ordered the street sealed. Shaw returned to Imogen, face tight. "He's here," Shaw said, "or someone like him. Beige coat again." He slipped away. Imogen pointed at the plaque. "This one is different. It's hiding something." Hargreaves stepped close, studying it, then signaled to a technician who approached with gloves and tools. As the technician worked at the plaque's mounting, the hum behind it grew louder, impatient. A faint clicking joined it, like a timer. "Bomb?" Shaw whispered. Imogen's mouth went dry. "Or a lock." The plaque came free with a soft suction sound. Behind it, set into the brickwork, was a small panel door fitted flush, with a modern keypad glowing faintly. And beneath the keypad, painted neatly in the same wrong shade of blue, was a single word: curator. Hargreaves' expression turned vicious. "Open it." The technician hesitated. "Sir, protocol." "Open it," Hargreaves repeated, voice like iron. The technician worked quickly, using a small scope camera through a seam. He cursed under his breath. "It's a compartment," he said. "There's a phone inside, and a speaker." "A speaker," Shaw echoed. A voice crackled through the brick itself, suddenly loud enough to make everyone freeze. "Good evening," it said, warm and amused. "Thank you for attending." Imogen's skin crawled. "You're trespassing," Hargreaves snapped. The voice laughed softly. "Detective, detective, you're interrupting art." Shaw's hand went to her radio. "Trace it," she hissed. The voice continued, unbothered. "You have been so kind to follow the trail. Bloomsbury, Chelsea, Spitalfields, London's spine, lit by little blue circles." Imogen stared at the hidden keypad, at the word curator, at the way the voice sounded intimate, as if speaking from inside her skull. "What do you want?" Hargreaves demanded. The voice paused, as if savoring the question. "I want you to look
it said. Not at the plaque, not at the crowd. Look at the house. Hargreaves motioned, and officers moved in. Inside, the Spitalfields townhouse was strangely empty, rooms cleared, walls bare, furniture removed. It wasn't a home, it was a set. Upstairs, in the front room, a desk sat under a single lamp. On it lay a book, open to a marked page. Above it, framed on the wall, was a printed quote in elegant font. And in the center of the room, upright and perfectly posed, stood a figure. Not a mannequin, a person. A woman, bound but standing, held upright by straps beneath her clothes, her head tilted at a precise angle, her face powdered pale, eyes open and terrified. Her mouth had been painted into a faint smile. The voice crackled again from the hidden speaker outside. A living exhibit, it said softly. Try not to spoil it. Hargreaves' face went white. Shaw swore under her breath and rushed forward. Imogen stood frozen in the doorway, watching the woman tremble, watching the careful way she'd been made into a character. The killer wasn't just staging death now.
He was staging helplessness, and he'd done it to someone real. They cut the woman free quickly. Shaw spoke to her in low, urgent tones while paramedics were called. The woman's name was Elise Cartwright. According to her shaking voice, she ran a secret literary London tour account and had posted the first promo for the Bloomsbury Plaque, thinking it was clever marketing. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I didn't know. They paid me to post. They said it was a reveal." Hargreaves stared at her like he was trying not to explode. "Who paid you?" She sobbed. "A company, Ward & Co. Heritage Experiences. They do private tours. They said it was a collaboration." Shaw's eyes snapped to Imogen. "Ward." Imogen felt the name hit like a bell. Celia Ward. She'd seen it on flyers in bookshops, elegant branding, private literary salons, exclusive townhouse readings, hidden London revealed. Theo had mentioned it once, scoffing at their authenticity. Hargreaves turned to Shaw. "Get me everything on Ward & Co. now." Shaw nodded, already moving, but Imogen spoke before she could stop herself. "The pigment," Imogen said. "Prussian blue. It's not common in legitimate plaque production. If Ward & Co. source props for tours, if they commission enamel," Hargreaves cut her off with a sharp look, "we'll raid them." As officers swept the townhouse, Imogen wandered into the kitchen area, drawn by instinct. The smell of paint was stronger here. On the counter sat a pair of disposable gloves, crumpled as if tossed in haste. Their fingertips were stained faintly blue. Imogen leaned in, and her stomach tightened. The blue wasn't just pigment. It was mixed with something glossy, almost oily, like a cosmetic base. The same kind of sheen she'd noticed on the corpse's aged face in Bloomsbury. They'd used the same material to paint a plaque and paint a person. A signature. Footsteps behind her. Shaw appeared, eyes scanning. "Found something?" Shaw asked. Imogen pointed. "Gloves, stained." Shaw's gaze sharpened. She lifted the gloves with tweezers, bagging them. "Good," Shaw murmured, "because we just got confirmation on Bloomsbury. Victim is Dr. Lionel Carfax." Imogen's throat tightened. Shaw added, "Carfax had emails. He'd been in contact with Ward & Co. He suspected they were behind a fake plaque racket, selling exclusive history." Hargreaves' voice echoed from the hall.
Then he got too close. Imogen stared at the blue-stained gloves, and an image surfaced, the beige-coated man, smiling, calm, slipping through crowds. Ward & Co. didn't just market London, Imogen whispered. They curated it. Shaw's eyes met hers, and now someone's killing to keep control of the story.
Ward & Co.'s listed address was a Chelsea office above a gallery. Clean windows, tasteful signage, the kind of place that sold atmosphere. But when police arrived, the office was empty. Desks cleared, walls bare. No computers, no files, just the faint smell of fresh paint, as if someone had tried to erase their existence. Imogen stood with Shaw in the empty space, while Hargreaves paced like a caged animal. Outside, London went on, unaware. They anticipated, Shaw said quietly. Hargreaves slammed a palm onto the window ledge. They invited crowds like it was entertainment, and then they vanish when it becomes crime. Imogen's gaze landed on something on the floor near the skirting board, a small blue fleck, like a chip of enamel. She crouched and picked it up with a tissue. It wasn't paint. It was a shard, curved, glossy, blue, plaque enamel, a fragment of a circle. Her pulse spiked. This place had plaques, she said. Shaw looked down. Or a workshop. Hargreaves' eyes narrowed. Where would they build them? Imogen's mind raced through London's geography, the places where you could drill and paint and mount without noise complaints, warehouses, basements, old studios. Then she remembered something Elise had sobbed through tears. Private townhouse readings, Imogen said. Ward & Co. hosted events in a townhouse. Shaw's eyes sharpened. Address. Imogen pulled out her phone and searched quickly, fingers trembling. An old flyer Theo had sent months ago. A listing.
An exclusive salon in a restored Georgian townhouse, location revealed after booking. Hargreaves leaned over. So we need their venue. Shaw's phone buzzed. Digital. Sir, Shaw said, listening. Then her face went hard. We traced the fake Plaque site hosting. The payments route through a shell. But there's a consistent IP ping. Near Bloomsbury. Imogen felt the world tilt. Near the first townhouse? She whispered. Shaw nodded, voice tight. Same area, same street block. Hargreaves' expression turned lethal. They're going back to their first stage. Imogen's stomach dropped. Why? Hargreaves stared at her, and for once his voice softened into something almost human. Because the first chapter is where you go to end the book, he said. They returned to the Bloomsbury townhouse just after midnight, when the street had quieted again and the city's attention had drifted to other screens. The plaque had been removed earlier, leaving clean bolt holes like wounds. Police tape still clung to the doorframe. The building looked ordinary now, stripped of its false authority. Inside, the air was colder than before. The hallway light flickered again, as if the house itself couldn't decide whether to be welcoming or haunted. They moved quietly, officers spreading through rooms, Shaw close behind Hargreaves, Imogen lingering at the edge, heart thundering. Upstairs, the front room where Carfax had died was empty now, the body removed, the portrait gone. Only the shape of the rug remained, a lighter patch where something heavy had rested. Imogen stepped in and felt the hairs on her arms rise. In the corner where the easel had been, a small speaker sat on the floor, modern, sleek,
ridiculous in this old room. It clicked on. A familiar, warm voice filled the space. "Imogen Vale," it said softly. Imogen froze. Shaw's hand lifted, signaling silence. "You have excellent eyes," the voice continued. "You noticed the pigment, the bolts, the seams. Most people only notice what they already want to see." Hargreaves spoke into the room like it could hear him. "Celia Ward," he said, "or whoever you are." The voice laughed gently. "Names are just labels, plaques for people." A footstep sounded from the hallway behind them. Slow, unhurried.
Imogen turned. The beige-coated man stood in the doorway, hands empty, expression calm. He looked like a person who believed he was in control of every room he entered. Behind him, half hidden, stood a woman in an elegant coat, hair pinned neatly, eyes bright with the kind of intelligence that can be cruel. Celia Ward. "You brought the police," Celia said mildly, looking at Imogen as if disappointed. "I hoped you'd come alone." Shaw's voice snapped. "Armed response will be here in—" Celia smiled. "And yet you're here now." Hargreaves stepped forward. "You staged Carfax, you staged the plaques, you kidnapped Elise. Where is the portrait?" Celia's eyes gleamed. "Safe. Art should be preserved." Imogen's stomach turned. "You killed him for a marketing campaign?" Celia's expression sharpened, offended. "No, don't cheapen it." She stepped into the room, gliding, and the beige-coated man followed like a shadow. "Carfax was ruining London," Celia said softly, "peeling away the magic and calling it fraud, as if stories don't matter, as if the city isn't built on narrative." Hargreaves' voice was ice. "So you murdered him?" Celia tilted her head. "I curated an ending." Imogen's hands clenched. "You used people, you used crowds." "Yes," Celia said simply, "because crowds believe. They want to believe. I gave them what they wanted, a secret address, a hidden plaque, a moment of history." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "And the body?" Celia's smile didn't falter. "A warning. To anyone who thinks London stories belong to them." The beige-coated man stepped closer, and Imogen saw faint blue staining under his fingernails. Prussian blue, a signature in the smallest place. Hargreaves' hand moved toward his jacket, controlled. "It's over." Celia's gaze flicked to the window, to the street outside where faint footsteps passed, ordinary life continuing. "Nothing is ever over in London," she said. Then, abruptly, she threw a small canister at the floor. It burst with a soft pop, and blue-tinged smoke billowed upward, dense, immediate, a fog that smelled sweet and chemical. Imogen coughed as the room vanished. Shaw swore, grabbing her radio, but the signal crackled uselessly. Through the fog, Celia's voice floated, intimate and amused. "Look," she whispered, "how easy it is to disappear inside a story." Imogen's eyes watered. She stumbled toward the window, desperate for air, and as she moved, her foot hit something on the floor. A frame. She dropped to her knees, fingers finding its edges. The portrait, hidden beneath the cloth, ready to be reclaimed. Imogen yanked the cloth away, coughing, and stared. The painting was different now. Not the young man anymore. It was Celia. Beautiful, composed, eyes bright. And the longer Imogen stared, the more the paint seemed to shift in the foggy light. Fine lines deepening at the corners of the mouth, shadows pooling under the eyes, a hint of something rotten beneath elegance. A self-portrait that wanted to confess.
Imogen grabbed the frame and heaved it upright, slamming it against the window so hard the glass rattled, drawing attention, making noise, ruining the quiet. Outside, someone shouted. A neighbor's light snapped on. A dog barked. The beige-coated man lunged toward her, but Shaw collided with him in the fog, bodies thudding, breath harsh. Hargreaves' voice cut through. "Celia!" Footsteps, fast now, retreated toward the stairs. Imogen clutched the portrait frame like a shield, coughing, eyes burning, and staggered into the hall. The fog spilled down the staircase like liquid, trying to swallow everything. Then the front door below slammed. A rush of cold air sliced upward, thinning the fog. Imogen stumbled to the landing and looked down. Celia Ward stood at the open door, backlit by streetlight, face calm as if leaving a party early. She looked up at Imogen once, eyes bright. "London will always choose the better story," Celia said softly. Then she stepped out into the night, into the city that loved crowds and myths and blue circles on walls. And she vanished. Days later, when the story broke, when journalists published the footage, when Elise spoke publicly, when Ward & Co.'s shell companies were torn apart, London did what it always does when a myth rots. It argued. Some people insisted the plaques had been real. Some people insisted the murders were performance art. Some people wanted to attend the next secret reveal anyway, because they couldn't stand the idea that magic had ended. Imogen stood outside the Bloomsbury townhouse one last time, watching workers fill the bolt holes where the fake plaque had been. Hargreaves stood beside her, expression tired. "You did the right thing," he said. Imogen stared at the clean brick. "I didn't stop her," she replied. Hargreaves' mouth tightened. "You exposed her. That's different." Imogen looked up at the empty space where the blue circle had seduced crowds. London's walls were full of stories, some true, some false, some dangerous, because people wanted them to be real. As she walked away, her phone buzzed. A notification. A new post on an anonymous account. A blue circle, a fresh address, and a caption that made her blood go cold.